Welcome, travelers of time and myth, to Forgotten Scrolls. Here, ancient words awaken, and echoes of the past come alive to whisper stories that cross the centuries. Tonight, we unroll a special scroll, one woven with threads of glory and destiny. It is the tale of a man who defied the gods and left an indelible mark on the memory of humanity. This is the story of Achilles. Before the war erupted in Troy, before heroes clashed upon burning walls, there was an origin, a child born with fire in his veins and a shadow in his heels. A warrior who did not seek battle but was called by it, as thunder is called by the storm. This is not merely the story of a hero, but of a soul divided between glory and loss. We invite you to close your eyes and let yourself be carried away by every image, every sigh of the ancient wind, as we journey together from the golden days of his childhood to the last echo of his name among the gods. You will witness not only the warrior but the man, not only the spear, but also the heart. This series is more than a simple narration. It is a voyage through the forgotten corners of Greek mythology, an ode to the moments that build eternal legends. And you, dear listener, will be a witness to each one. From his birth to his fall, Achilles will speak to you with every battle, every tear, every step toward his destiny. Prepare yourself. What you are about to hear is not just a tale, it is an epic. Chapter 1. The birth of the invincible Achilles was born. In an era where heroes walked among mortals and gods watched intently from Olympus, his mother Thetis, a sea nymph, knew her son was destined for an extraordinary life. From the very first moment, Achilles showed a strength and a sparkle in his eyes that foretold his invincible future. The home where he grew up was filled with stories and secrets, and his birth was celebrated with songs and promises. Everything seemed to conspire for this child to be more than a mere mortal. Thetis, fearful of the destiny that awaited her son, sought to protect him from the world's dangers. She knew the prophecy that promised Achilles a short life, yet one full of glory. To prevent the young warrior from facing an early death, his mother decided to immerse him in the sacred waters of the River Styx. These waters possessed the power to confer invulnerability, save for the spot where Thetis held him. Thus, the legend of the invincible began to take form. From an early age, Achilles was surrounded by care and attention, but not only his body strengthened, so did his mind. He learned to listen to the wind, to feel the pulse of the earth, and to read the signs that destiny sent him. His first steps were under his mother's tutelage, who taught him the value of love and patience. However, she knew that Achilles needed to prepare for a world where war and honor would be his companions. The voices of Olympus whispered both for and against Achilles. The gods debated whether he should live among mortals or achieve eternal glory. Zeus observed with interest, while Athena granted him wisdom and protection. Divine presence enveloped every moment of his childhood, marking his path with light and shadow. This blend of power and vulnerability would be part of his deepest nature. As he grew, Achilles proved restless and curious. Nothing seemed to deter his desire to learn and to grow stronger. He ran through the forests, immersed himself in rivers, and dreamed of adventures he could not yet imagine. His days passed between games and lessons as the world began to prepare for his arrival in history. The young hero already distinguished himself by his courage and indomitable spirit. Thus ended his early childhood, full of hope and mysteries. Achilles was destined to be much more than an ordinary child. His birth was not merely an event for his family, but for all who awaited the arrival of a hero who would forever mark history. From that moment, the legend of Achilles began to unfold, like a gentle wind that would soon transform into a storm. Chapter 2. The river that made him nearly eternal. The River Styx was a sacred place, shrouded in an almost mystical silence, where waters seemed to flow between the world of the living and that of the gods. Thetis, her heart filled with both hope and fear, brought Achilles to its banks to shield him from all harm. Immersing him in its waters signified an act of love and sacrifice, for immortality came with a price few understood. There, Achilles' destiny began to intertwine with the divine. As she submerged him, Thetis held her son firmly by his heel, the only spot untouched by the blessed water. It was in this small detail that his vulnerability lay, a secret that would be kept for years. The waters enveloped Achilles in a silvery glow, as if the river's essence permeated every fiber of his being. The cold and calm of that moment were etched forever in his memory, though he did not yet grasp the magnitude of what had occurred. Achilles awoke feeling different, as if an invisible force coursed through his body. His skin seemed impenetrable, and his heart beat with newfound confidence. Yet, deep down, there was also a mystery, a whisper reminding him that nothing was perfect or eternal. The River Styx not only made him nearly invincible, but also marked his destiny with a shadow that would become his greatest trial. For years, Achilles unknowingly kept this secret as he grew, displaying unparalleled skill with every step. His strength was impressive, and his agility supernatural. Those around him began to see him as a special, almost divine being, yet no one suspected that his single heel would remain vulnerable, a hidden weak point that destiny awaited to reveal at the precise moment. The story of the River Styx became a myth told around campfires, where elders spoke of the source of Achilles' strength. It was a tale filled with magic and hope, inspiring those who dreamed of immortality. Thetis, meanwhile, continued to watch over her son with a mix of pride and fear, aware that glory could also bring pain. Thus, the River Styx not only changed Achilles' life, but also sealed his destiny. His almost eternal body was both a gift and a burden, a blessing and a curse among the fates. The young hero was ready to face the world, yet with the certainty that the river held a secret that would test his strength and his soul. Chapter 3. The Warrior's Prophecy. From the moment Achilles was born, murmurs circulated about an ancient prophecy that enveloped his destiny. The temple oracles had announced that a warrior of incomparable strength would bring glory to his people, yet his life would be brief and fraught with challenges. These words resonated in the air, creating a mix of hope and fear among those who knew his story. Achilles, still unaware, already carried the shadow of his future. Achilles' parents listened intently to these words, conscious of the responsibility that fell upon their shoulders. Thetis, in particular, felt the weight of the prophecy as a constant reminder of life's ephemeral and precious nature. She knew she had to protect her son without preventing him from fulfilling his destiny, a difficult task requiring patience and wisdom. Meanwhile, the young boy grew without imagining the scope of what awaited him. As Achilles developed, the prophecy seemed to manifest in small details of his daily life. His bravery shone through every trial, and his strength astonished everyone around him. However, signs also began to appear that his life would be marked by pain and loss. These signals, though subtle, were enough to awaken a sense of unease within him, sometimes causing him to reflect in silence. The village elders shared stories of past heroes, comparing Achilles to legendary figures from distant eras. These narratives had a dual purpose: to inspire the young man and to warn him of the lurking danger. Achilles listened attentively, learning that greatness is measured not only in victories but also in sacrifices and difficult choices. Every story was a lesson that shaped his character. The prophecy, more than a condemnation, acted as a beacon guiding Achilles on his path. Through its words, the young man began to understand that his destiny was not entirely written, and that how he faced his challenges would define his true essence. This thought brought him momentary peace, a respite amidst the uncertainty surrounding his life. Thus, the prophecy became a constant companion, a distant yet firm voice reminding Achilles of the importance of every decision. His heart was torn between the desire to live fully and the need to accept an uncertain future. This fragile balance marked the beginning of his transformation, preparing him for the decisive moments that were soon to come. Chapter 4. Childhood among Centaurs. Achilles spent much of his childhood far from men, under the tutelage of Chiron, a wise and benevolent centaur who lived in the sacred forests. This mythological being was known not only for his strength, but also for his wisdom and knowledge of healing arts and warfare. Here, Achilles found in Chiron a mentor who understood the blend of humanity and divinity dwelling within him. It was there, among ancient trees and crystal-clear rivers, that his true learning began. The centaur taught Achilles not only how to fight, but also to respect nature and to know the limits of body and mind. His lessons were profound and filled with patience, adapted so that the young man could discover his own powers without losing humility. In those moments, Achilles learned that true strength is born from the balance between skill and control, a lesson he would never forget. Coexisting with Chiron and other forest beings filled Achilles' days with stories of heroes and gods, fables that spoke of bravery and sacrifice. These narratives, told by the light of the stars, strengthened his spirit and connected him with a world beyond the visible. Moreover, Chiron's presence was a constant reminder that wisdom and strength could coexist in harmony. During those years, Achilles developed a special sensitivity towards animals and plants, learning to listen to the voice of the wind and to interpret the signs of the forest. This deep connection with nature complemented his preparation for war, giving him a broader understanding of life and death. Every day in the forest was an adventure and a lesson in humility. However, even though his childhood among centaurs was a time of growth and learning, Achilles felt an inner restlessness that pushed him to seek his own destiny, beyond that refuge. He knew that the world outside those forests awaited him, and that he had to prepare to face what was to come. This certainty was a silent fire burning in his chest. Thus, Achilles' childhood was marked by a mix of tranquility and preparation, of protection and challenge. Under Chiron's guidance, the young hero was molded not only into an invincible warrior, but also into a being aware of his responsibility and humanity. This time was the solid foundation upon which his legend would be built. Chapter 5. Training with Chiron. Under Chiron's tutelage, Achilles embarked on rigorous training, yet one filled with profound lessons. The centaur not only instructed him in sword and spear combat, but also taught him to understand the pulse of the world around him. Every movement was accompanied by a lesson on patience and respect, reminding him that strength without control could become dangerous. This training instilled in Achilles an essential balance between power and wisdom. Days began with endurance exercises, where Achilles ran along hidden forest paths, feeling his body strengthen with each stride. Then, Chiron guided him in archery and spear-handling practices, perfecting his precision. But most important were the deep conversations beneath the shade of ancient oaks, where the centaur shared stories of heroes and taught lessons about honor and justice. As seasons passed, Achilles learned to master his temper and control his impulsiveness, a challenge that required more strength than any combat. Chiron showed him how rage could be a weapon if kept in check, but also an enemy if unleashed. These lessons were essential in forging the young warrior's character, preparing him for the trials that would come in his life. The training also included exercises to sharpen his senses, such as listening to the wind's whisper or detecting an animal's movement from a distance. Chiron taught that a true warrior must always be alert, not only to defend himself, but to protect his own. This connection with nature broadened Achilles' perception and strengthened his bond with the natural world. Not everything was struggle and discipline. Chiron also fostered creativity and strategic thinking. The centaur encouraged Achilles to imagine different scenarios and to seek intelligent solutions to win without shedding unnecessary blood. This teaching balanced brute force with a cunning mind, creating a complete hero capable of adapting to any situation. Finally, at the end of each training day, Achilles felt his body and soul grow in harmony. He knew he was building the foundations for something greater than himself. And though he didn't know all the details of his destiny, he trusted that each lesson brought him one step closer to his purpose. In that forest, under Chiron's guidance, the warrior who would change history was born. Chapter 6. The Spear of Destiny. Among the many objects Achilles learned to handle, the spear was the most special and symbolic. It was not merely a weapon, but a symbol of his power and the responsibility he carried on his shoulders. Chiron presented him with a spear forged from sacred metals, imbued with the blessing of the gods, destined to be his companion in battle and a witness to his victories and challenges. Achilles received the spear with reverence, feeling the weight of his future in his hands. The centaur explained that this spear was not only mortal to his enemies, but also represented the link between the human and the divine. Each time he wielded it, he had to remember that his strength was not solely for himself, but to protect and honor a greater purpose. This understanding gave a deeper meaning to every training session. His first practices with the spear were difficult, but Achilles showed a natural aptitude that surprised even Chiron. His skill and speed grew with each throw and every parry, and his confidence increased with the certainty that this object was part of his essence. The spear became an extension of his body and spirit, an inseparable ally that would mark his path. Throughout his learning, Achilles understood that the spear also symbolized the fragility of destiny. Every movement could change the course of a battle or the life of a loved one. Therefore, he had to use it with wisdom, and not just with force. This awareness led him to reflect on the nature of war and the price it carries, a thought that would accompany him in his future decisions. Chiron recounted stories of heroes who, despite their strength, were defeated by imprudence or pride. He warned him that the spear could be a blessing or a curse depending on the heart that wielded it. Achilles listened attentively, understanding that true power lay not in the weapon itself, but in the one who wielded it with honor and respect. This lesson was fundamental in shaping his character. Thus, the Spear of Destiny was not just a weapon for Achilles, but a symbol of his inner journey and his mission in life. Every day of training with that spear brought him closer to the legend he was destined to become, and also reminded him that his strength must serve good beyond personal glory. Chapter 7. The Disguise Among Maidens. To shield Achilles from the danger that shadowed his destiny, his mother Thetis devised a cunning and risky plan. She concealed him in the court of Lycomedes, disguising him among the palace maidens. There, Achilles had to pretend to be just another young woman, hiding his true identity to avoid being called to war. This disguise was not merely physical, it was also a test of patience and self-control, a time of silence before the storm. Though the disguise kept him safe, Achilles felt a growing unease. Life among the maidens was strange for a warrior, and his rebellious spirit wrestled against the stillness and confinement. The mask he wore hid him from the world, but also from himself, creating an inner conflict between his true self and the facade he had to maintain. It was a time of waiting that seemed endless. In this temporary refuge, Achilles learned to observe and understand the world from a different perspective. He listened to the conversations, the worries, and the dreams of the young women around him, discovering a sensitivity that enriched him. This unexpected learning taught him the importance of empathy and respect, qualities that would complement his strength in the future. However, the calm of this period was interrupted by clear signs that his destiny was calling him. Messages and rumors about the war in Troy crossed the palace, and responsibility weighed increasingly heavily on his conscience. Though hidden, Achilles knew he would soon have to abandon his disguise and confront the reality that awaited him beyond those protective walls. The tension between the desire to remain hidden and the need to fight grew within him. Every day at court was a silent battle against inaction and fear, while his heart yearned for action and glory. This conflict prepared the young warrior for the difficult decisions he would have to make, marking a turning point in his life. Thus, the disguise among maidens was much more than a simple deception. It was a crucial stage for Achilles, where patience, reflection, and acceptance began to mold the legend that was about to be born. Soon, the hidden warrior would discover that he could not escape his destiny. Chapter 8. The Call to War. The echo of war reached the palace where Achilles was hiding, resonating like an impossible call to ignore. The dispute between Greeks and Trojans grew, and the need for a hero like Achilles became increasingly urgent. Despite his disguise and refuge, destiny pushed him toward the battlefield, and the young warrior began to feel the irresistible force of his mission. This call was not merely a summons to fight, but also to glory and sacrifice. Achilles understood that war was not just a clash of swords, but a path filled with decisions that would test his honor and humanity. To heed that call was to accept that the life he had known until then would change forever. The decision to abandon his disguise and confront the war was a moment filled with mixed emotions. The blend of fear, determination, and responsibility pounded fiercely in his chest. However, Achilles knew he could not refuse. His destiny claimed him, and he had to fulfill the duty assigned to him even before his birth. As he departed for the Greek camp, Achilles felt a mix of sadness and hope. He left behind a safe refuge to venture into the unknown, facing the possibility of death but also the opportunity for immortality through his deeds. This moment marked the beginning of a new stage, full of challenges and revelations. The call to war also awakened in Achilles a sense of belonging and purpose. For the first time, he felt part of something greater than himself, that his actions could change the course of history. This connection with his people and his comrades in arms strengthened his spirit and ignited his courage. Thus, Achilles answered the call with the resolve of a warrior and the sensitivity of a man who knows his path will be filled with glory and pain. Destiny awaited him on the horizon, and the young hero was ready to face it without fear. Chapter 9. The Journey to Troy. The journey to Troy was a time charged with anticipation and silence. Achilles, alongside the other Greek warriors, crossed unknown seas and lands, leaving behind his childhood and everything that had been safe. The horizon opened before him as both a promise and a threat. Deep within his soul, he felt the weight of what was to come, and uncertainty mingled with courage. During the nights at sea, Achilles reflected on his destiny, gazing at the stars and seeking answers. War was not merely a battle of forces, but a test of who he truly was and what legacy he wished to leave. In the silence of the night, his mind traveled back to his days with Chiron, recalling lessons of wisdom and control. These memories sustained him in moments of doubt. The Greek camp on the coast of Troy was a bustling place, filled with nervousness. Soldiers from different lands prepared for war, and the atmosphere was charged with tension. Achilles began to feel the responsibility that made him a central figure in that conflict. Every step he took on that ground brought him closer to battle and to the fame his name would achieve. During the journey, Achilles forged bonds with other heroes, sharing strategies, stories, and dreams of glory. These ties created a network of support and camaraderie, but also awakened jealousy and rivalries, ingredients that would make the war more complex. Achilles was aware that he would not only have to fight against enemies, but also against internal conflicts among his own allies. The journey to Troy was not only physical, but also spiritual. Achilles felt that every wave, every wind, brought him closer to his final destiny, yet also transformed him into someone different. He was a young man shedding innocence to become a warrior with a clear purpose. This change filled him with a mix of fear and determination. Finally, upon arriving on the shores of Troy, Achilles knew his life would never be the same. The war would soon begin, and he would have to be prepared to face not only enemies, but also his own fears and doubts. The journey had been the first step on a path that would lead him to immortality. Chapter 10. The First Combat. Achilles' first combat in the Trojan War was a decisive moment that revealed the magnitude of his power and his destiny. In the heat of battle, the young warrior felt his training and spirit unite in a deadly dance. Every movement was agile and precise, and his presence on the battlefield inspired as much fear in his enemies as admiration in his comrades. Achilles' strength seemed inhuman, and his courage shone with a light of its own. However, behind that invincible appearance beat a heart that felt every blow, every loss, and every triumph. In his mind, Chiron's words and his mother's teachings guided him to maintain the balance between fury and reason. This combination made him a formidable warrior. Amidst the chaos, Achilles found his rhythm, moving like an unstoppable force carving a path through enemy ranks. His spear, the symbol of his destiny, cut through the air in silence, and every enemy that fell at his feet increased his confidence. But war was not only physical combat, it was also a duel of wills, where the mind had to be as strong as the body. The Greeks began to see in Achilles the hope they needed to win the war. His arrival changed the army's morale, and his exploits became stories told around the fires. However, Achilles knew that every victory came at a price, and that glory could be fleeting if not managed with care. The young hero also discovered that the battle was not only against the Trojans, but against his own limits. He felt the weariness, the pain, and at times doubt, but his determination kept him steadfast. This first combat was the baptism that marked the beginning of his legend and also the proof that the path would be long and full of challenges. Upon concluding the day, Achilles gazed at the battlefield with a mix of satisfaction and sadness. He had demonstrated his strength, but he had also witnessed the human cost of war. He knew this was only the beginning and that his destiny was still to be written in blood and honor. Chapter 11. Glory in Battle. Glory in battle began to surround Achilles like a halo, illuminating his name among the Greek warriors. Every victory amplified his reputation, and his fame spread beyond enemy lines. Yet, despite his success, the young hero maintained an inner calm that distinguished him from other combatants, who succumbed to arrogance. His strength was balanced by the wisdom he had gained through his training. Achilles was not merely a powerful warrior, but also a symbol of hope for his comrades. In the darkest hours, his presence lifted spirits and gave meaning to the fight. War claimed lives, but it also forged heroes, and Achilles knew his role was to be one of them, a beacon amidst the chaos. This responsibility was heavy, yet he accepted it with dignity. Stories of his exploits began to be told in the tents and nearby villages. They spoke of his speed, his strength, and his bravery, but also of his ability to lead and protect his own. Achilles felt his name approaching eternity, yet he also knew that glory could be fleeting if not safeguarded with humility and honor. In the midst of battle, Achilles displayed an almost supernatural skill, dodging attacks and striking with precision. Every movement seemed like a rehearsed dance that left his enemies defenseless. However, behind that, perfection was a man who felt the weight of war and the sorrow of every loss. Glory never erased the pain that accompanied the fight. The gods watched intently, and some even intervened in the fates of mortals. Achilles understood that he was not just a man, but a piece in a much larger divine game. This gave him a mix of power and vulnerability, as his path was marked by forces beyond his control. His glory was also a test. At the end of each day, Achilles meditated on the meaning of victory and the price paid. He knew that glory was both a gift and a burden, and that he had to remain true to his values to avoid losing himself on the path. This reflection made him a more complete hero, one who fought not only for fame, but for a true and lasting legacy. Chapter 12. The Pride of a Hero. Achilles' pride began to swell with each battle won, fueled by the recognition and admiration of his comrades. However, this pride became an ambivalent force, for while it gave him confidence, it also isolated him. He felt that no one could match his strength, and this began to create a distance between him and the rest of the Greek army. Arrogance was starting to creep into his heart. Despite his power, Achilles understood that pride could be a silent enemy. Many times he fought against this feeling of superiority, recalling his mentor Chiron's words about humility and control. However, in the heat of battle and the fervor of victory, pride found its space to grow. This would mark key moments in his story. The hero began to make decisions that reflected his growing confidence, sometimes without consulting his allies. His pride gave him the certainty that he could act alone, and this caused tensions with other leaders, especially Agamemnon. Achilles felt he deserved more respect and recognition, and that wound of pride began to interfere with the army's unity. This stage also revealed a more human side of Achilles, where the inner struggle between pride and honor became evident. He knew he had to maintain his courage but also control his ego to avoid falling into the destructive arrogance. This internal conflict would be a crucial point for the events to come in the war. Pride, though dangerous, was also part of what made Achilles a hero. It was a fire that fueled his desire to be remembered, to leave an indelible mark on history. But this flame had to be managed wisely so that it would not turn into his downfall. Thus, pride became a constant companion and a difficult test. Finally, Achilles began to understand that a true hero shines not only through his strength, but through his ability to recognize his limits and learn from them. This awakening was slow and painful, but essential for his growth. Pride ceased to be merely an obstacle and transformed into a vital lesson for the future. Chapter 13. The Wrath of Achilles. The wrath of Achilles ignited like a burning fire, consuming his heart and mind. It all began when Agamemnon, the Greek leader, took Briseis from him, the woman he had won in battle, whom Achilles considered his only close companion amidst the chaos. This act was a profound offense that not only wounded his honor, but awakened a rage difficult to control. Fury became his shield and his sword. Achilles decided to withdraw from the war, a gesture that surprised everyone and left the Greek army vulnerable. His absence meant losing their most powerful warrior, and the enemy took advantage. His wrath had made him strong and feared, but also vulnerable to loneliness and pain. In his days of retreat, meditating in his camp, he felt the weight of the conflict between his wounded pride and his duty to his comrades. The hero became inaccessible to his allies, and his silence spoke louder than 1,000 words. The war continued, but without his presence, the Greeks began to suffer inevitable defeats. Achilles' fury was so intense that no counsel or plea could make him return. He walled himself off in his world of anger, distrusting those around him and questioning the meaning of the war. Wrath became a shadow that clouded his judgment, though it also fueled his strength. In that state, Achilles reflected on the fragility of human bonds and the price of dignity. His soul was wounded, and the hardest battle he faced was against his own conflicting feelings. He was an unbeatable warrior, yet vulnerable to betrayal and pain. Despite everything, his wrath did not extinguish his nobility. Within that burning fire, the heart of a hero still beat, yearning for justice and truth. His fury was directed not only at Agamemnon, but at a destiny that seemed cruel and a war that claimed lives senselessly. This internal conflict made him more complex, more human, and paved the way for events that would change his life forever. Finally, the wrath of Achilles became the prelude to an inevitable return. Although at that moment it seemed nothing could calm his fury, destiny had other plans. History would remember that period as the antechamber to a great change, when passion and pain united to forge the true character of the invincible warrior. Chapter 14. The Loss of Briseis. The loss of Briseis struck Achilles' inner world like an earthquake. She was not just a war prize, but an emotional bond that kept him connected to humanity amidst the chaos. Their separation was a cruel reminder that even the most powerful heroes could suffer invisible wounds that affected their spirit and will. In his camp, Achilles felt Briseis' absence as an impossible void to fill. Each night the silence grew denser and the pain deeper. The loss became a weight that pushed him into darkness, further alienating him from his comrades and the battle. His heart, normally brave and strong, was broken by injustice and betrayal. This absence affected not only Achilles, but also the morale of his soldiers, who saw in Briseis a symbol of hope and humanity. Without her, the hero seemed a shadow of himself, lost between rage and sorrow. The war was not only physical, it was also an emotional battle that tore at the souls of those who lived it. Achilles began to reflect on the price of war and the losses it left in its wake. Briseis represented much more than a captive woman. She was a connection to a world he had left behind. This understanding opened a deep wound, but also planted a seed of determination to recover what was lost at any cost. Amidst his pain, the hero felt the need to find a new purpose. The loss of Briseis pushed him to look beyond immediate suffering and to prepare for a struggle that would transcend the physical battle. It was a moment of transformation where love and pain intertwined to shape Achilles' destiny. Finally, Briseis' absence not only left a void, but also ignited the spark for a vengeance that would shake the world. The hero, marked by this loss, began to walk a path that would lead him to confront his darkest and most decisive destiny. Chapter 15. The Duel with Agamemnon. The tension between Achilles and Agamemnon reached its peak in a verbal and spiritual duel that shook the foundations of the Greek camp. It was not merely a physical battle, but a clash of egos and power. Agamemnon, as commander, tried to maintain authority, but Achilles questioned his decisions and his arrogance. This confrontation reflected the deep fracture that the war had created among the leaders. Both men faced each other defiantly, aware that this dispute could change the course of the war. The rivalry was not only personal, but also symbolic, representing two visions of honor and leadership. The lack of agreement weakened the army, and as they argued, the enemy gained ground on the battlefield. This confrontation was a crucial episode that marked Achilles' history. The duel revealed Achilles' vulnerability, exposed not only by his wrath, but by his sense of justice and dignity. Agamemnon seemed an implacable rival, but also a man trapped in his own fears and ambitions. Tension grew to a point where both had to choose between continuing the dispute or seeking a path that would serve a greater good. The dispute was harsh and left deep wounds on both sides. In Achilles' mind, the duel not only represented a fight for Briseis, but a battle for the identity and respect he felt he deserved. For Agamemnon, it was the defense of his power and control over the Greek coalition. This internal and external conflict complicated the hero's destiny and the destiny of the entire war. Despite everything, there was a moment of reflection when both understood the need to yield to avoid total destruction. Reconciliation seemed distant, but the war demanded unity. This duel, though painful, served to show the humanity behind the invincible hero and his struggle against his own shadows. Finally, this episode solidified Achilles as a tragic and powerful character. His confrontation with Agamemnon symbolizes the eternal struggle between pride and duty, which would mark the course of his destiny. It was a decisive moment that set the stage for the events that would follow and deepen the legend of the invincible. Chapter 16. The Champion's Absence. The absence of Achilles on the battlefield was an open wound for the Greeks. Without his presence, enemies advanced with greater confidence, and defeats began to pile up. The hero's silence was a cry that resonated in every corner of the camp, reminding everyone of the importance of his strength and courage. His withdrawal profoundly affected collective morale. The soldiers felt the lack of their leader and protector, and morale plummeted day by day. The war became more difficult, and hope seemed to vanish amidst the blood and dust. Achilles' absence not only weakened their physical strength, but also left an emotional void that no other warrior could fill. He was the soul of the Greek army, and without him, darkness grew. This period of absence was a time of reflection for Achilles himself. Isolated from his comrades, he faced his own inner demons and the painful reality of war. He questioned the meaning of the battle and his place within it. The distance transformed him, as anger gave way to sadness and the need for redemption. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the allies fought desperately, aware that their champion's absence could cost them victory. Leaders tried to maintain order, but they knew that without Achilles, the fight was uneven. This fragility increased tension and the urgency to bring him back. Despite his retreat, Achilles was not absent from history. His shadow remained present in every combat and in every victory or defeat. His figure was a constant reminder of what had been lost and a silent call for him to return to change the destiny of the war. His absence was felt both in battle and in the hearts of his friends. Finally, the champion's absence became a crucial stage in history, setting the scene for tragic and heroic events. Destiny called him again, and the world awaited his return for the legend to continue to be written with blood, valor, and sacrifice. Chapter 17. The Death of Patroclus. News of Patroclus's death struck the Greek camp like a bolt of lightning. Patroclus, Achilles' inseparable friend, had donned the hero's armor to try and halt the Trojan advance. His fall was a devastating blow to all, but especially to Achilles, who lost not only a comrade, but a soul brother. Grief seized his heart with a force no warrior had ever known. This event marked a turning point in the history of the invincible. Sadness and guilt mingled in Achilles' soul as he understood that his pride and anger had come at a terrible price. War now showed him an even crueler face, and the loss of Patroclus awakened in him a profound desire for vengeance that would drive him back to the battlefield with unstoppable fury. Patroclus's death became a symbol of human fragility, even for the most powerful heroes. Amidst his sorrow, Achilles recalled moments shared with his friend, their laughter, battles, and confidences. That unbreakable bond strengthened his spirit to face the coming storm. Patroclus's absence was a void no victory could fill. The Greeks felt the scales of destiny begin to tip. Without Patroclus, the war lost part of its soul, and with Achilles absent, despair mounted. However, the fury contained within the hero's chest was about to explode, transforming his pain into a devastating force. The battle for Troy entered a new phase, marked by the intensity of vengeance. At that moment, Achilles understood that war was not only an external combat, but an internal struggle against his own feelings and limitations. Patroclus's death pushed him to cast aside his pride and face his destiny with all the strength of his being. His return promised to change the course of the conflict and unleash a power never before seen on the battlefield. Finally, Patroclus's death sealed Achilles' fate as a warrior destined for glory and sacrifice. It was a painful chapter, full of mixed emotions that set the stage for vengeance and redemption. The hero's story was now intertwined with tragedy, making his legend even deeper and more human. Chapter 18. The Avengers Return. Achilles' return to the battlefield was like the awakening of an unstoppable storm. His fury, contained for days, erupted with a force that stunned all present. With his armor gleaming and spear in hand, the invincible hero returned to avenge Patroclus's death and put an end to Trojan resistance. His presence inspired both fear and hope in equal measure. The Trojans felt the weight of his return, and the battle immediately intensified. Achilles fought with a fury that seemed divine. Every blow was a discharge of wrath and pain transformed into power. The earth trembled beneath his feet, and the air filled with the sound of his war cry. His enemies knew they faced an implacable being, ready to destroy everything in his path. This return was not only a display of strength but also a moment of profound transformation for Achilles. His grief over Patroclus's loss turned into a determination to honor his memory. Every fallen enemy was an offering to his friend, and every victory brought him closer to the justice he sought. His heart burned with a fire that only vengeance could fuel. The Greek allies regained hope upon seeing their champion fight again. Morale lifted, and the army strengthened with Achilles' renewed impetus. His leadership inspired courage and unity, reminding them that victory was still within reach. The war changed pace, and the tide began to turn in favor of the Greeks. Amidst the chaos and violence, Achilles also confronted his doubts and fears. His fury was powerful, but he had to control it to avoid being lost in darkness. His return was a rebirth, an opportunity to find a balance between strength and wisdom, and to fulfill his destiny as a tragic and eternal hero. Finally, the Avengers' return marked a turning point in the Trojan War. Achilles' legend grew stronger with every step he took, and his story was written in blood, valor, and a profound love for his lost friend. It was the beginning of the final stage of his great epic. Chapter 19. The Duel with Hector. The confrontation between Achilles and Hector was the culminating moment of the Trojan War. Two powerful warriors, each representing the honor and strength of their peoples, met in a combat that would determine the city's fate. From afar, the armies held their breath, aware that what happened in this duel would decide the future of both sides. The clash was fierce and filled with tension, with every blow struck with the force of years of training and passion. Achilles, driven by his thirst for revenge, displayed an almost divine skill, while Hector defended his home and his people with unwavering bravery. The ground became a witness to the deadly dance between two titans, and the sky seemed to pause to watch the combat. During the fight, strategy and strength intertwined, but so did a silent respect between the two warriors. Hector knew he faced an invincible enemy, and Achilles recognized the nobility of his adversary. However, the war allowed no truces, and the duel advanced with an intensity that tore hearts and defied destiny. Finally, Achilles managed to strike down Hector, but not before showing the greatness of the fallen rival. Hector's death signified an irreparable loss for Troy and a painful triumph for the Greeks. But victory brought no complete joy to Achilles, as his respect for Hector mingled his triumph with a bitter sense of moral defeat. Hector's body was dragged by Achilles around the Trojan walls, an act that reflected both the warrior's fury and the deep grief he felt. This gesture further inflamed the battle and emotions between the two armies, setting in motion a series of events that would lead to the war's conclusion. Thus, the duel with Hector was not only a physical battle, but a symbolic confrontation between two forms of heroism. It was the point where Troy's destiny was sealed, and where Achilles reaffirmed his role as the most feared and legendary warrior of his time. Chapter 20. The Enemy's Funeral. Hector's death opened a chapter of sadness and reflection for both sides in the war. In Troy, the loss of the prince was felt as a devastating blow that broke the city's spirit. Preparations for the funeral were carried out with great solemnity, mingling sorrow with respect for a warrior who had defended his home until his last breath. The funeral was a ceremony full of symbolism, where family and allies paid tribute to Hector. They mourned his absence, but also celebrated his life, remembering his acts of bravery and sacrifice. Amidst the sadness, the community united to find comfort and strength, aware that their struggle would continue, though without their brightest leader. Meanwhile, Achilles faced his own internal battle. Hector's death, though necessary for his vengeance, brought him neither peace nor joy. In his heart, the warrior felt the burden of war and the weight of the destruction his fury had caused. He reflected on the fragility of life and the inevitable destiny that bound all men, heroes and enemies alike. Hector's funeral also symbolized the end of an era for Troy. As the flames consumed the prince's body, a sense of uncertainty and change spread through the city. The war continued its course, but Hector's absence meant that nothing would be the same, and hope grew fainter each day. At this moment, mixed emotions revealed the humanity behind the legend. The rivalry between Achilles and Hector, though marked by war, also held a deep mutual respect that transcended their enmity. The funeral represented a tribute to that respect, and a necessary pause to remember that even in conflict, there is dignity and honor. Finally, the enemy's funeral was a farewell that resonated in everyone's hearts, leaving an indelible mark on Troy's history and in the memory of the invincible Achilles. It was the closing of one cycle and the opening to what would come in the epic battle for destiny. Chapter 21. The Last Truce. After days of intense combat, a strange calm fell upon the battlefield. Both sides, exhausted by the war, accepted a temporary truce, a necessary respite to heal wounds and reorganize forces. This pause not only halted the clash of swords and spears, but also allowed the warriors to reflect on the cost of the seemingly endless conflict. During this truce, furtive conversations were heard among the leaders, attempting to find a way to avoid further bloodshed. However, distrust was palpable. Every glance hid suspicion, and the shadow of war still weighed on everyone's spirits. The truce was a delicate balance between the hope for peace and the inevitable reality of combat. In the camps, wounds began to be tended, and warriors shared stories of past battles and dreams of a future without war. The campfires lit at night served as a backdrop for tales that blended bravery and sorrow, showing the humanity behind the hardened soldiers. The atmosphere, though tense, offered moments of camaraderie and rest. But the truce also brought with it hidden tensions. Those who longed for war saw this pause as a weakness to be exploited. Intrigues and strategies were woven in silence, preparing the ground for an imminent return to conflict. The calm was only superficial, a breath before the definitive storm. In Achilles' heart, this truce was a moment of internal struggle. His rage and desire for vengeance confronted an unexpected longing for peace, for finding meaning beyond war. However, he knew that the truce would be fleeting, and that his destiny was still tied to the edge of the sword and the roar of battle. Finally, the last truce was a moment of pause, reflection, and preparation, a sigh amidst the chaos that marked a before and after in the Trojan War, paving the way for what would come with renewed force and tragedy. Chapter 22, The Shadows of Destiny. With the end of the truce, shadows began to spread over the destiny of heroes and warring peoples. Whispers of ancient prophecies regained strength as the war resumed its course with more cruelty and determination. Destiny seemed to play with the warriors, moving its pieces on an invisible and mysterious board. Achilles, as the central figure of this dance of shadows, felt the weight of the inevitable. The decisions he made were no longer solely his own, but were influenced by forces that transcended human understanding. Doubts and omens filled his nights as he prepared to face what destiny held for him in Troy. Shadows also loomed over his defenders. Hope struggled to stay alive amidst the ruins and constant losses. Leaders looked to the horizon with concern, aware that they were fighting not only a visible enemy, but against the fatality that seemed to envelop everyone involved. The war became a battle not just of bodies and weapons, but of wills and spirits. Heroes began to feel their steps guided by an implacable destiny that seemed to lead them towards an inevitable and tragic conclusion. Shadows lengthened, covering everything with a mantle of uncertainty. But amidst this darkness, small lights of resistance and hope shone. Loyalty, honor, and love for land and people were forces that defied destiny, attempting to write a different end to the foretold story. These lights were the very essence of the heroes, their strength to face the impossible. Thus, the shadows of destiny enveloped the war, marking the path toward an outcome where the lines between glory and tragedy blurred, and where every action seemed destined to forever change the history of Troy and its protagonists. Chapter 23, Paris's Ambush. Twilight covered the battlefield when Paris, Prince of Troy, decided to execute a daring ambush. With cunning and stealth, he gathered a small group of warriors to attack the unsuspecting Achaean forces. This action was motivated both by the pursuit of glory and his desire to prove himself amidst the war tearing apart his homeland. The ambush was prepared in secret, amidst whispers and shadows, as tension grew in the enemy camp. Paris's men moved cautiously, attentive to any sign of danger. The night seemed to conspire in their favor, covering their movements with a mantle of darkness that allowed them to approach undetected. However, destiny was not on the Trojans' side this time. Surprise turned into chaos when the Achaeans discovered the ambush in time, leading to a fierce confrontation. The battle was intense and swift, testing the bravery and skill of Paris, who found himself forced to fight for his life amidst the crossfire. Meanwhile, the war continued its relentless course, and Paris's ambush became a decisive episode that altered the balance of forces. Though he did not achieve complete success, this action demonstrated that even the less regarded could make a huge difference in such a grand and destructive conflict. Murmurs about the ambush spread through both sides, creating a mix of respect and warning. Paris began to be seen not only as a prince, but as a warrior capable of defying luck and destiny. This ambush, though imperfect, sowed seeds of hope and fear in equal measure. In the end, Paris's ambush left a clear lesson. In war, courage and strategy can change the course of events, but fortune and destiny also play their part, reminding everyone that no victory is guaranteed. Chapter 24. The Uncovered Heel. As the war continued, a hidden secret began to unveil itself. The uncovered heel of the invincible Achilles. His strength and resilience were legendary, but this hidden vulnerability was the key to his destiny. Since childhood, Achilles had been protected by his mother with a charm that made him almost invulnerable, save for that small spot on his heel that was never covered. This detail went unnoticed by many, even by Achilles himself, who fought with the certainty of his invincibility. However, knowledge of his vulnerable heel began to circulate among his enemies, who saw in it an opportunity to change the course of the war in their favor. The threat of that small heel became a symbol of human fragility, even in the greatest heroes. Tension mounted as the shadow of danger loomed over Achilles. His allies tried to protect him with constant vigilance, while he continued to confront his enemies with the same fierceness as always, never imagining that his weak point was known and awaited by his adversaries. The paradox of his strength and fragility became increasingly evident. In Achilles' heart, the revelation of his uncovered heel created a mix of fear and defiance. His pride prevented him from showing weakness, but the reality of his vulnerability reminded him that death could stalk even the most powerful. This duality drove him to fight with even greater intensity, aware that his time might be limited. The uncovered heel thus became a tragic symbol, the line between glory and fall. As the war intensified, this small weakness transformed into the key that could define not only Achilles' fate, but also the destiny of Troy and the entire war that had shaken the ancient world. The story of Achilles and his vulnerable heel remained an eternal reminder that no being, no matter how strong, is exempt from fragility, and that glory and tragedy are always intertwined in the path of heroes. Chapter 25. The Poisoned Arrow. The war seemed endless, with the roar of battles echoing in every corner of Troy. Amidst this storm, a poisoned arrow was shot from a distance, cutting through the air with lethal precision. No one knew who had aimed it, but the victim was clear. Achilles the Invincible fell wounded for the first time. This event changed the course of the conflict forever. The poison in the arrow not only caused unbearable pain, but also sapped Achilles' strength and energy. The warrior who until then seemed unbeatable. His resistance, forged in countless battles, began to yield to the invisible threat the poison represented. Uncertainty quickly spread among his comrades, who feared for their leader's life. The camp's doctors and healers worked tirelessly to save Achilles, using herbs and ancient rituals. However, the severity of the wound and the speed with which the poison spread defied even their deepest knowledge. Achilles, aware of his vulnerability, fought not only against the enemy, but against the betrayal of his own body. Meanwhile, in the enemy camp, the success of this deadly arrow was cautiously celebrated. Hope was rekindled for those who feared the invincible power of the Achaean hero. But concern also arose, for this action could unleash an even fiercer vengeance, a reaction driven by Achilles' wrath and wounded pride. Achilles' poisoning was not only a physical blow, but a moral blow to the entire Greek army. His fall symbolized the fragility that stalked even the greatest. The battle for Troy, already complex, acquired a new dimension of danger and despair, with the hero's fate hanging by a thread. Despite the poison, Achilles resisted, fueled by his indomitable spirit and the desire for honor. This poisoned arrow transformed into a test that would define not only his destiny, but also that of the war shaking the ancient world. Amidst the pain and uncertainty, his legend began to take a new course. Chapter 26. The Hero's Fall. The sun rose slowly as Achilles, weakened yet still defiant, returned to the battlefield. His fall was not silent or tranquil, but marked by the fury and despair of a warrior who knew his end was near. Every step he took was a struggle against the destiny that loomed over him with relentless force. The enemies, aware of his vulnerability, rushed with renewed vigor against the hero. Spears and arrows flew around him, seeking the exact moment to strike down one who had been a symbol of invincibility. The battle turned into a whirlwind of violence and despair where glory and death intertwined inseparably. Achilles fought with the strength of 1,000 men, but the wound and the poison inexorably drained his body. Every movement required a titanic effort, and the blood flowing from his body seemed to announce the inevitable fall of a giant. However, his spirit remained ignited, refusing to surrender to adverse fate. The climax arrived when Paris, the prince who had shot the arrow, came face to face with Achilles in a duel that would be etched in the memory of the war. The encounter was swift and brutal, and although the hero's strength was imposing, the poisoned arrow made the fatal difference that sealed his fate. With his last breath, Achilles looked towards the horizon, aware that his time had come. The hero's fall not only represented the loss of a warrior, but the end of an era in the Trojan War. His body was carried away from the field, while the echo of his bravery resonated among the still fighting ranks. Achilles' death marked a turning point in the war and in history. His legend would not die with him, but would grow and become an eternal symbol of sacrifice, bravery, and the fragility that accompanies even the greatest. The hero's fall opened a new chapter full of hope and pain in Troy's destiny. Chapter 27. The Echo of His Legend. After Achilles' fall, a heavy silence descended upon the Greek camp. The echo of his legend began to resonate among the warriors and the lands of Troy, like a whisper crossing mountains and seas. Although his body lay lifeless, his spirit seemed to live on in every battle, in every act of courage that inspired his comrades. The memory of the invincible became a beacon guiding those who still fought. Stories of his exploits were told around the campfires, each time with greater drama and admiration. Achilles was not merely a man. He was the embodiment of courage and strength that defied the gods themselves. In the heat of war, his name was invoked to instill valor and hope in those who felt the weight of defeat. His legend began to take on a life of its own, transcending reality. The memory of Achilles spread beyond the borders of Greece and Troy, reaching the most remote corners. Poets and bards traveled from camp to camp, narrating the story of the hero who defied destiny and fought against death. His figure inspired future generations, shaping the very concept of heroism and sacrifice. His name became synonymous with eternal glory. But not only allies remembered Achilles, even his enemies felt the weight of his absence. The fear he once caused now transformed into respect and a silent acknowledgement of his power in the heart of Troy. Achilles' legend was a constant reminder that even the strongest can fall, but their legacy endures long after. The dead hero lived on in collective memory. As days passed, the war continued, but with a different rhythm. Achilles' intangible presence seemed to both protect and challenge those who remained standing. His voice resonated in the minds of his friends and enemies, an echo that motivated and terrified at the same time. Thus, his legend became a bridge between mortality and eternity, an imperishable symbol. Finally, the echo of Achilles' legend transcended time and history, becoming a myth. His life, his battles, his fall, and his glory were woven into the fabric of human culture. Through songs, tales, and monuments, his name would forever be uttered, an eternal whisper that defies oblivion and celebrates the greatness of a true hero. Chapter 28. The Judgment of the Gods. With Achilles' death, the gods of Olympus watched intently the unfolding of the war. Their judgment became inevitable, for the hero's fate had altered the balance between mortals and deities. Zeus convened an assembly where each god would express their opinion on Achilles' role and the impact of his fall on the human world. The discussion was intense and filled with divine emotions. Athena defended Achilles, exalting his valor and dedication to justice, while Apollo, protector of Troy, lamented the loss of the hero who had caused so much pain to his city. The gods debated whether his destiny had been just, or if higher powers should intervene to grant him a reward beyond death. The judgment highlighted the tensions between divine justice and the caprice of destiny. Hermes, the messenger, recounted Achilles' final hours, describing his struggle and fall as a heroic act worthy of recognition. Hera, however, questioned the hero's arrogance, reminding them that even the most powerful must submit to the will of the gods. This dispute reflected the duality of human nature, the pursuit of greatness and the acceptance of humility. Meanwhile, on Olympus, it was decided that Achilles would receive a special place among the immortals, not as a god, but as an elevated being whose name and deeds would be eternally etched in the firmament. His judgment was a mix of honor and warning, symbolizing the thin line between glory and tragedy, divinity and mortality. The gods sent Hermes to announce this decision to humans, a message that blended solace and challenge. Achilles would not be forgotten or reduced to a mere death story. Instead, he would be remembered as a hero whose destiny served to teach lessons about valor, pride, and sacrifice. His divine judgment marked a before and after in the relationship between gods and men. Finally, the judgment concluded, with the acceptance that heroes, though mortal, can achieve immortality through their deeds and their memory. Achilles, the invincible, became an eternal symbol of this truth. His judgment by the gods not only sealed his fate, but also opened the door to the immortality of his name, where his story would continue to inspire future generations. Chapter 29. The immortality of his name. The name of Achilles transcended time, becoming a symbol of bravery and eternal glory. Beyond war and death, his legacy remained alive in the memory of men and gods. He was remembered not only as an invincible warrior, but as an example of the price of greatness and sacrifice. The immortality of his name was the ultimate reward that history bestowed upon him. Poets and artists captured his exploits in songs, paintings, and sculptures, perpetuating his figure in the culture and soul of his people. Each generation relived his story, finding in it inspiration to face their own battles and challenges. Thus, Achilles became a universal legend, whose name evoked honor, strength, and immeasurable passion. Though he no longer walked among mortals, his presence seemed to be felt in the most crucial moments, when courage was needed to change destiny. The immortality of Achilles' name was a constant reminder that true glory goes beyond physical life. His essence remained, touching hearts and igniting spirits. Even in times of peace, his story was a beacon for those seeking greatness. Heroes who followed. His path carried in their souls the indelible mark of the invincible warrior. The immortality of the name was not just a tribute, but a promise that his spirit would continue to guide those who fought for higher ideals. The whole world recognized that although Achilles had faced his destiny with fury and pride, his name had transcended that final battle. Immortality was not arbitrarily granted by the gods, but by the eternal power of his legend, woven with blood, courage, and sacrifice. Thus, it was ensured that his name would never be forgotten. Finally, the immortality of Achilles' name was sealed by time and human memory. His story became a perpetual echo, an eternal whisper that defies death and oblivion. Achilles did not truly die. He lived and will always live in the very essence of heroism and the fight for eternity. Chapter 30. The Eternal Whisper of Achilles. Throughout the centuries, Achilles' whisper continued to resonate in the winds that cross ancient lands. It was a subtle murmur, a voice that invited us not to forget the lessons of the past and to always seek greatness with humility. This eternal whisper carried with it the strength and wisdom accumulated in his life, an intangible legacy for those who listened with an open heart. The whisper was felt in the heat of every battle, in the calm of night, and in moments of reflection for those facing their own destinies. It was as if Achilles, though absent, never ceased to accompany the men and women who strived to overcome their limits and defend what they valued. His voice was an invisible yet powerful guide. This eternal whisper also carried the warning that glory was not just a matter of physical strength, but of wisdom and honor. Achilles, through his life and death, taught that true immortality resides in actions that endure and in a spirit that never surrenders. His whisper was a constant reminder not to be overcome by pride or unrestrained anger. As ages passed, the whisper mingled with history and myth, making it difficult to distinguish where the man ended and the legendary hero began. However, that fusion was precisely what kept his memory alive. The eternal whisper was proof that Achilles had achieved a form of existence beyond the tangible. The eternal whisper also symbolized the connection between past and present, between gods and mortals, between life and death. Each time someone heard that voice, they felt a call to be stronger, fairer, and to fight for a greater purpose. Thus, Achilles remained a beacon in the darkness, a light that never fades. Finally, the eternal whisper of Achilles is the very essence of his legend, a perpetual call to bravery, sacrifice, and the pursuit of immortality through honor. His story, his teachings, and his spirit remain alive in every corner of the world, reminding us that heroes never truly die. Extra chapter: Secrets of the Heel. Although his legend is widely known, there are fascinating details that many are unaware of regarding Achilles. For example, the famous Achilles' heel does not appear in Homer's Iliad. In that account, the exact cause of his death is not mentioned. It was much later, in other versions and subsequent texts, where the idea of his heel's vulnerability emerged, becoming a universal symbol of hidden weakness. Another curiosity is the myth of how his mother, Thetis, attempted to make him invulnerable. Some legends claim she submerged him in the River Styx, holding him by the heel, but there are alternative versions where she anointed him with ambrosia each night and placed him over fire to burn away his mortal part. This act was interrupted by Peleus, the child's father, horrified by the ritual. The episode where Achilles disguises and hides among maidens has also inspired countless plays, paintings, and even modern novels. This story symbolizes the attempt to escape destiny and how even the greatest warrior cannot elude his calling. The way Odysseus discovers him by offering weapons among jewels shows how his warrior nature was impossible to conceal. Achilles has also been portrayed as a hero divided between two paths, a long and forgotten life or a short and glorious one. He chose the latter, etching his name forever. This dilemma has inspired philosophers, writers, and filmmakers who see in him a metaphor for the price of fame, the weight of decisions we define as eternal. Though his body fell at Troy, his figure rose to the cultural Olympus of the world. Indeed, Alexander the Great, one of history's most celebrated conquerors, carried a copy of the Iliad and visited Achilles' tomb in Asia Minor, paying homage to him as his greatest hero. Extra Chapter 2: The Enduring Legacy of Achilles. Throughout the centuries, Achilles' name has not lost its power. His story has been told, reimagined, and adapted in every possible form, from ancient epic poems to contemporary films, video games, graphic novels, and animated series. Achilles is not merely a mythological character. He is an archetype, the brilliant, passionate, and tragic warrior whose glory is as luminous as his fall. In museums worldwide, ancient vases preserve scenes from his life: combats, duels, his education with Chiron, and the weeping over Patroclus' body. These images connect us directly with an ancient humanity that, like us, sought meaning in stories of courage and loss. Ancient art reminds us that Achilles was and continues to be more than a myth. He is part of humanity's memory. In schools, his story continues to be studied as one of the pinnacles of universal literature. The Iliad not only tells of a war, but of the soul of a man who, though nearly immortal, was terribly human. His intense emotions, his pride, his pain, his redemption, all resonate with those who discover him for the first time, generation after generation. Many say that Achilles did not truly die, that as long as someone remembers him, as long as his name is spoken and his story heard, he lives on. In that sense, Achilles achieved something even the gods would envy: an immortality not measured in physical eternity, but in cultural, emotional, and spiritual presence. Here at Forgotten Scrolls, we have together unrolled this ancient scroll filled with valor, tragedy, and hope, because in the end, heroes are not those who live forever, but those who inspire eternally. And Achilles, without a doubt, continues to inspire all who hear his story.